right, here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MT4MH studios, where we spread our love and we share our ketogenic lifestyles. This is the Find Your Keto Show, and I'm your host, Stephen T., ready to guide you on your low carb journey. Today, I am thrilled to introduce Brett Smith, a passionate health coach based in Germantown, Wisconsin, and a leader in the metabolic health movement. Brett and I first crossed paths as volunteers for the Metabolic Revolution Initiative, where we both contributed to the powerful Parade of Proof, which was a demonstration of the transformative potential of metabolic therapies. Brett played an integral role as the leader of this event, showcasing his dedication to spreading awareness and advocating for health improvements through nutrition and lifestyle changes. Recently, I had the pleasure of joining him as a guest on his own podcast called My Metabolic Life, where we discussed our shared mission and insights. Brett is also the co-host of another engaging YouTube channel, the Mitochondriacs, where he educates and inspires others on their journeys toward better health. Brett, how are you today?
I'm great, Stephen. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm thrilled to be here.
It's great to have you. So let's dive right in.
Absolutely.
Can you give us a brief overview of your background and what first led you to focus on your health transformation?
Some of it is that, health has been my background. I mainly came into the health insurance world for about 20 years, both on the insurance company side and the brokerage side of things. And I then moved into pharma for a short brief and sold 2 cardiovascular drugs plus 2 others. I then moved into a 10-year corporate wellness disease management stint. And during that time, and for a short period of time before that, I had started gaining weight through my 30s and 40s. And so I had tried, like a lot of people, a number of different things. I even tried our coaching services. Didn't really work for me. And it wasn't until I had all of us siblings, I'm one of 4 kids, older brother, older sister, younger brother, and the sister's 60th birthday was October of 2016. And we all went out to celebrate that. And I suddenly noticed that my younger brother, who I hadn't seen in about 4 months, dropped like 30 pounds. So with that, I'm like, what did you do? And he goes, I did this low carb keto thing. And that was all that was said that night because I was confused by it. I thought I understood most of the diets in the world, being in the wellness world and selling our own diet coaching programs. And so I didn't think about it until the next day. I went down to Chicago to play in a national platform tennis tournament, and my ability to function on the court as being functionally fat, as I referred to myself as for 15 years, was no longer functional. I was just fat. And so I came home deflated and decided I need to jump in to figure out what my brother did. And that's where you could say a bunch of different things started happening. I'll leave it there and let you go where you want to go with it.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, so that's a very familiar story. It was the same for me. I initially lowered my carbs to lose some weight, and you hear that from a lot of people, and then they discover all these amazing benefits that come along with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what were some key moments or achievements that stand out in your journey so far?
I would say the very first thing was as I started looking into this, I kind of very early on brushed it off and was very dismissive because I just go, this is some fad diet that there's nothing to any of this. But as I was trying to pay attention to it, they were talking about, oh, you don't have to worry about your LDL, saturated fat's healthy. And I'm like, I've been selling disease management programs. This is not in the guidelines. This is not what is taught at the dietitian's school. And so I got very fearful for my brother's life and health. And I go, I don't want him to be a skinny guy in a casket. So having sold both pharma and 10 years of selling you could say my corporate wellness was selling predictive modeling algorithms. We had 40 different disease states that we could forecast whether somebody potentially had a condition that they didn't even know about based on their health risk assessment and blood profile. And I had to go around to the nation and sell to the chief medical officers at all the major brokerage and consulting firms and at healthcare systems that would want to private label and resell our programs, why the science behind our programs was the best. So I was pretty well educated in the scientific method, evidence-based medicine, all of these, things. And I go, well, I'll just jump into PubMed and find the definitive studies that show my brother that he's doing a fad diet. And that became elusive, and that became a little bit of an obsession. And I wound up putting 60 hours which is virtually all of your free time, in November, December of 2018, till I came to the conclusion that there's incredible amount of things broken. So I guess when you say what are some of the things that stood out to me, the first thing is I came to the realization of how little of our true medical knowledge that is in the published research is taught to our doctors in our hospital, or excuse me, our doctors, our dietitians, our nurses, and medical people. And so there's a phrase that goes around on some of the podcasts that I broke my brain. And I realized, oh my God, almost everything, all of my 30-year career history has been focused in industries that are using incomplete information. And with that, the only thing you can do is try to manage conditions, because you should be trying to reverse them. So I came to that epiphany, and Dr. Sarah Hallberg right here, whose poster was on the stage with us when we were in Washington, D.C. at the Metabolic Revolution, was a major part of that, helping me understand that. She's got a famous TED Talk that says that you can find on YouTube, called "To Reverse Type 2 Diabetes, You Have to Ignore the Guidelines." And I'm like, ignore the guidelines? I sold the guidelines. And but when you dig into it, you start realizing that all of the credible data is on her side, and not really on what is taught in medical schools. So that was a major thing that made me decide, okay, 1/1, I'm going to go all in, even though in December of 18, I started phasing out the processed crap and everything. So I kind of did a slow, gradual, but 1/1, I went, you could say, all in, limited myself to 20 carbs a day, and started having tremendous success. I lost like 38 pounds in the first 6 weeks. And that got me believing that, oh my God, I'm starting to look like a person who could be in the wellness and disease management world. And so I decided to jump back in all of that, which led to other stories, which will come up through time here. But so I just kind of realized how upside down so much is. And now 6 years later, I'll just quick jump way ahead and kind of be reflective on that at first it was just such a stunner that things could be so upside down. And then as you put about 12,000 hours over 6 years into figuring out why, because I'm a huge history buff, and it's kind of hard to argue with that. The system that we have in the world right now is designed to generate these results, is where my belief system is now. If somebody would have said that to me in early 2018 or any time in my 30 years of being in and around health world, I would have said, you're wearing a tinfoil hat and you're a crazy person for saying that. So, but it's with an incredible amount of time and research and understanding, because let's face it, when people figure out what you figured out and helped you figure your stuff out, and I figured out my stuff, and we can go into what all those different things are. And if everything's reversed, there's just not as much need for the system as it is right now and as it's built up. So I'll leave it there if that's okay. And we can, go into your next area.
All right, that's great. Well, I want to touch on one thing you said there, was that when you got serious about your diet and making a change, you kept your carbs under 20 grams. So a lot of people don't even know what that means or how you would do that. Did you use an app to track? How did you know how many carbs you were eating and how to stay under 20?
That really comes down. Well, I want to play off of the first half of that sentence you said. So,
Okay.
having been in the corporate wellness and disease management and having been a lifelong athlete, I'd like to think that I was trying to pay attention to things. And I now, looking back, realized that there were certain stress eating things that led to the weight gain. Because if you looked at my average meals, most people looking at them would say they were healthy. It was more late night stress eating that I did that destroyed the body. But as far as in that 60-hour deep dive, I understood the significance of reading labels, and also there's a ton wrong with our labeling system and how and what we do things and what they can and can't say on labels. And so I became pretty astute with that. So I guess the easiest way to describe this is in just 30 seconds, there's three micronutrients that we can put in our body. Macro, I just said micro, but there's three macronutrients. There's protein, there's fats, and there's carbohydrates. And there are, at least for the fats and carbohydrates, healthy and unhealthy versions of all of those. But a carbohydrate, all carbohydrates are of chains of carbon that metabolize to sugar when it goes into your body, by definition, biochemistry wise. And so as I learned about ketosis and realized that the human body starts finding ketosis when you get to about the 50 carb or lower day, if you wish to live a ketogenic lifestyle, then that means you kind of have to limit your carbs to 50 or less. But in that first 60 to 70 hours of learning, I came across Dr. Eric Westman, who was also in Washington, D.C. with us. And he has, you could say, coined the phrase medical strength, prescription strength ketosis. And after him now for 22 years doing this and being an obesity doctor and helping thousands and thousands of people with this, he came to that term. He goes, well, you start into ketosis around 50, but you're kind of guaranteed success if you can get to 20 total carbs a day. And then there's also a thing called net carbs. And I would just say, for this sake of argument right now, to keep it as brief as possible, ignore net, stick with total. That's a way to get you to buy a lot more stuff that is in the processed carb world, simply put. But if you stay at 20 total carbs, so when you read the labels of what you're putting in your mouth, what foods, what meals you're making, and yeah, because I used to, because all of us came out of in my professional career was calorie counting type stuff. So I had found apps that I used in the past where I could at least, instead of counting calories, I didn't care what the calorie said. I cared what the carb was. So I would look at the labels of what I'd eat, and then I would, go into Google and find out, well, in this amount of broccoli, how many carbs are there? What's 10 carbs of broccoli look like, and things like this. And so so for the first 4 weeks, I really entered everything I ate in those 4 weeks. But by the time you say, okay, I made an egg salad sandwich on a low carb bread that I know the roll is 2 carbs, and the eggs are this amount, has this or the mayo or whatever. And by the time you do it for a couple of weeks, you don't need an app any longer to tell you. You just start recognizing, just like, this is my right hand. This meal has 7 to 10 carbs in it. You just structure your meals to kind of be in the carb window that you want. So if you're going to have 3 meals in a day, you structure it for 7 about carbs a meal, 2 meals a day, 10 carbs a meal. And that's, so I use, and it was called the Spark. Spark was the name of the app that I used, but I come across that years ago. I was just familiar with it. So that's how for a couple of weeks. And then now I can just kind of look at something, go in a fridge, go in a cupboard. And I don't buy many things that come in bags and boxes. So I don't have to read labels all that much anymore. But that's an evolution that's come over the last, early in the last 6 years, but over the last 6 years.
All right, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. So that's a good message to put out there to people that you may need to weigh your food and you may need to track it for the first couple of weeks just to see where you're at. But if you can formulate some meals that you know work, and like you said, you get familiar with it. Some of us, like me, we're doing it for mental health, and my fat is my target. And now I've been doing it for so long that I could tell you based on how much fat and how much meat I have, what my fat's going to be. But I track anyway because it helps keep me on point. And for a lot of people that are doing it for mental health, where you need to have a certain fat percentage, it is very, very useful to track. And some people are just like me and we just like to track. I like to see the numbers and I like to have everyday tracked. I do it for my daughter as well. And but I track a lot of different things in my life. I'm tracking my exercise and my sleep and
Yeah.
all kinds. So some people are like me and we want to track and some people don't. But even if you're not a tracking type person, take the path you took. You do it for a couple of weeks until you get familiar and then you don't have to do it anymore because it can be a chore for some people to have to weigh their food and track.
But it totally makes sense beyond whatever personal, we can say, quirks that we all have. Some of us like to do those things, some of us don't like to do those things because we quirk on either side of that equation. But when people are dealing with serious health issues, whether we call it physical health or mental health, and then how profound the healing and the removal of those conditions can be, and then they realize, oh, I screw up a little bit, and suddenly it starts creeping back on me, or I could have a full-blown episode of some kind. It makes complete sense why people would want, because you understand what, your life was like in the past life, and you understand the control you have now. Makes complete sense to want to be as dialed into that as you can be.
Yeah, for me, I need to do that because so most people will say that when you switch from a standard American diet to a ketogenic diet, that a switch gets flipped and your brain starts working differently, you become a different person. So that's true for me. But then I also have a second switch that gets flipped when I do the HFBO diet and when I keep my fat ratio at a 4-to-1, like you would do for epilepsy.
Yeah.
And it's very easy for that. I call it like a turbo boost. It's very easy to lose that turbo boost. It could be as simple as I didn't sleep well, or there's a cold in the house, or maybe I just had too much protein for too many days in a row, and then I lose that edge. And unfortunately for me, my most prominent symptoms are irritability and anger, and I'm trying to be the best dad I can be, and I'm trying to remain calm. So trying to track everything in an app is the best way for success for me. I know that I can go 1 or maybe 2 days and having a lower fat percentage. But if it's more than that, I'm going to end up running into some issues. And I'm trying to keep myself on that turbo boost as long as possible.
And I think it's fascinating. I'm actually really excited to keep following your story and, for us to stay in touch through time because, I didn't know until just the last year and a half or so, even though I realized how important the ketogenic diet, and it was kind of created at Mayo Clinic in the 20s and at John Hopkins 1920s for epilepsy. I didn't realize until just the last year or two that for the 68% or so of epileptic children that respond positively to this, that they tend to only have to be on it for 5 years. They're able to become off and they're kind of stamped with cured. And I don't know if that's only because they got at it at such a young age and might have corrected some of the things that were leading to all of this. And but I come from a family where my mother was bipolar from 8 years before I was born, during the pregnancy of my older brother, who's 8 years older than me, and her father, my grandfather, bipolar. And, I don't, it'd be fascinating. I don't think we have enough track record with the people who've been having success with the bipolar, the schizophrenia, the depression, the anxiety, anorexia, and all of these different things that this seems to heal, whether at a certain point in time, like with the epileptics, whether that maybe you don't need to be so strict down the road. Who knows? I mean, we're all in here. Here's a shirt that I got in DC. We're all our own N=1 experiments.
I love that.
We have to figure it out on our own because no randomized controlled trial might determine what necessarily things are going to mean for me or for you, because we both have different genetics, different things, and different journeys that got us to where we were. So there's a lot of moving factors, but I find it fascinating. So that's why I made the comment that who knows?
Yeah, I believe that diet is highly individualized and no two keto diets are going to look the same. And that's how I came up with the name for my channel, Find Your Keto. I want to help each person find their keto, find what works for them. So for me, maybe I've often wondered, maybe I have the possibility if I stuck to this for a couple of years, could I go back and eat other things? And for a while, it distracted me and kept me off my course because I was like clinging to the idea that, well, I could still go back and eat these old things, but I'm to the point now that I don't even care. If that's not the case, I really could care less. I'll just stick to what I'm doing because feeling as good as I do most of the time is well worth skipping some of the foods I miss out on by eating a high fat beef only diet.
Can I share and provide a quick little mea culpa? And forgive me, Father, I have sinned, and share a little story that happened over the last year and a half for me. Because I'm this is now 6 years as of this date that I've started all of this. And for the last 5 of the 6 years, the first 5 of the 6 years, I became very, and I'm there again, mentally tough. Let's just say that, I could walk into any environment. I could go in a grocery store and say, poison, 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 and just walk past things and it wouldn't faze me. And along with the weight loss that I had, which I don't think we covered it yet, but I lost 115 pounds in those 9 months of 2019 from January 1 through September. But I also kind of halfway through that 9-month period of time decided that I was going to start lifting weights and try to not bulk up, but put on mass, because the old joke was I was so skinny, I used to have to run around the shower to get wet or the water would go right by me. And I didn't want to go back to being that skinny guy. I wanted to have some muscle, and I was understanding the relevance of muscle tissue with longevity and fighting off sarcopenia. And also there was a lot of talk about muscle being a glucose sink, so that if you ever do air and put a little bit more in your mouth, you got that much more muscle cell to pull it out of the bloodstream and neutralize it as quick as possible. Well, about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and this could have been a stress, because I'm a stress eater. That's where I said my problems were late night eating. We won't get into all the reasons for that, but that was my problem. And I stress ate, and things got a little stressful last year again for a while. And all of a sudden I started N equals 1 thing. I wonder, with now 25 pounds, so I lost 115, but I put on 25 without changing my waist. And I'm like, I wonder how much of a glucose sink I have now. And I just tried to test it a little. And a couple of things happened. One, I didn't up broccoli for adding carbs. I went to some stupid stuff, which if you're doing a smart N equals 1, I should know, because I do know what high fructose corn syrup and things like this that, let's say, could be in a Dairy Queen Blizzard, what that would do to me. And just trying it a couple of times turned into once every other week to once every third day to 4 times a week to all of a sudden I reawoke that sweet tooth, because I am a little bit of a sugar addict and a stress eater. And suddenly I'm like, I put some weight back on and went up a belt size. And I'm like, I'm an idiot. I go, I should not make this mistake. And the funny thing is as I've launched my YouTube channels, which started appearing on other people's YouTube channels, July 12th was my first appearance on No Carb Life. You could see it in my face. And then as people started seeing me on different episodes and some of mine, they start commenting oh, Brett's looking better now, because I did go full on carnivore just to try that as an N equals 1, because I was kind of in the 90 to 85% for most of the last 4 years, what you would call 90% carnivore, 85%. And we can, if you want to know what that would require. But this last August 1st, I just went full on. I even cut out coffee. And, so it's just meat, fish, and eggs since August 1. Dropped it all again. Feel great again. And, but one of the guys who's kind of a healthcare hero of mine, who got me Dr. Jack Cruz, heavy into quantum and circadian biology, which we'll get to later. But he calls us all silly talking monkeys. And sometimes I acted like a stupid, silly talking monkey instead of a rational person who understands all of this. We can sometimes talk ourselves into things that we know are not in our best interest. Anyhow, there's my mea culpa.
Oh, that's funny. Silly talking monkeys. I like that. All right. I want to talk about your experience with heart disease.
Yes.
I know you had an initial calcium score, and
Yes.
let's educate the audience on what a calcium score is and how you get that tested, and then you could tell us about when you first discovered you had heart disease.
Sure. So way back when I started in the corporate wellness world, when I was around 43-ish, 44 years old, and I mentioned, I sold predictive modeling algorithms to find different conditions. That's when I started learning about what a calcium score was, because the protocol would be, if we think somebody has heart disease, or if your doctor suspects you might have symptoms that make them think heart disease, the fastest thing to do is go and get what's called a CT heart scan. And what a CT heart scan does is it gives you a CAC, or some people call it an Agneson score, because that's after a cardiologist down in Miami who created the scoring mechanism of defining this. So a CT heart scan just takes a scan of around your heart, and it's looking at the arteries feeding blood to your heart, and it's seeing, and it's taking kind of, in some, it's an MRI type image, and you can find calcified plaque, hard plaque, in the arteries. And if you find that, now you have the beginning, or you are well, I shouldn't say the beginning, you are well advanced into having a form of heart disease. And then that's quantified by, in each of the four main arteries, they each get their own calcification score. So so they wanted me to go get one done at 45, 12 years ago. Or I take that back, a lot longer than that ago. But when I was 45, I had one done, and I had a 0 calcium, and I just was like, yay, celebrated on the way home from getting that score with a quarter pounder from McDonald's, just like, I'm great. I don't have anything to worry about. I know it's stupid, it's silly, but again, we can be silly talking humans or monkeys. So calcified plaque is the second phase of what we call atherosclerotics or atherosclerosis. And there's two kinds of plaque. The MRI can only see the calcified, the stiff plaque, the plaque that's there because the body didn't process and heal things properly and clear it out of there. There's also another form of plaque called soft plaque, and that's actually, and nothing of what I'm saying in this next couple sentences here, people in the heart disease world differ on some of these things, but most people recognize, I'd say the vast majority realize, that heart attacks happen when we have soft plaque that isn't stabilized, like the calcified plaque, and it ruptures. Think of it as like a pimple on your face, and now a pimple on the inside of your artery just erupted, and that little eruption becomes a blood clot in the artery and can go off, and wherever it now deprives a part of your heart from oxygen, that's the definition of having a heart attack. And so there's two kinds of plaques. The CT heart scan, anybody should be able to get in at any healthcare system. And sometimes you can self-refer yourself in for as low as $50. It used to be that way. It just changed here. Now, the system that was doing that here in my area requires a doctor's prescription or a referral request for the test. And so then you get a score for each artery and then an aggregate score for all four. So fast forwarding, when I started losing all the weight and I got back into the disease management world, I was super amped up. I mean, I was just like, oh, I'm going to go save the world, because I realized that most people in the disease management and wellness worlds somehow, with leaving that industry for 4 years and then spending this 100 hours learning all of this, I kind of leapfrogged where their knowledge base was at. And I was so excited to get back in and I started like in my office, and this is my home office now, but I was like pacing back and forth because I was just all amped up once I signed my acceptance letter. And I'm like, I started saying to myself, this is awesome. In like 4 or 5 more months, I'm going to be thin again. I'm not on blood pressure medication, which I've sold that in pharma. I'm not on metformin for diabetes or anything like this. And my brain was about to go to the word bulletproof. I was about to say, I'm going to be bulletproof. And then I realized, oh, the best-selling book when I was in college was called The Complete Book of Running, author Jim Fixx. And when he was 52, looking like a Greek god, died of a heart attack on a 5K run because he didn't have a CT heart scan. He didn't know he had issues he needed to be addressing. And then also Dr. Sarah Hallberg right here, she became the chief medical officer of a company called Virta Health. And this was Virta Health was a major part of my epiphany, because they were going after Fortune 500 companies, and still do, to reverse diabetes in the population at employers with the ketogenic diet. And the billionaire who funded and got that whole thing running, just like Jim Fixx, who died of a heart attack, this guy had just, we'll say 2012, I think it was, it could have been 11. He had just come back from Hawaii winning the over 50 age category in the Ironman, and comes back and gets an A1C score of 5.6, or excuse me, of 6.4. You get to 6.5, you're now considered a type 2 diabetic. Right. So he's still pre-diabetic. He's almost full type 2. And he's like, I'm the fittest 50-year-old in the world. I just won this competition. So those two stories came back to my brain as I started thinking and about to say bulletproof to myself. And I'm like, being thin and not on medications means nothing. Neither one of these guys were on medications. They looked like Greek gods. And so I just said to myself, I go, well, I'm 55 then, I'm 61 now. And I just said to myself, I'm like, well, I'll go get another heart scan. If I can pass it with another 0, then I can start kind of celebrating and keep just trusting the process, lose the rest of the weight, live my ketogenic lifestyle, and move forward. And so I went and got a scan then in March of 2019 and found out that they called me back 2 days later and said, Mr. Smith, you have a score of 268. And I had one artery that was still clean. I had another artery that had about 40 score. I had another artery with like around 90 and one with more. And you add the 3 of them up and it's 268 for the 3 of them. So yeah, that was a kick in the teeth, and it did kind of probably about 48 hours put me into a funk from getting that news. But then I woke up and I said, hey, 4 months ago, I determined the disease management world should be the disease reversal world. And I knew from things I had learned that this being part of metabolic syndrome, that just like hypertension and diabetes, those things are easily reversed on a ketogenic lifestyle. And so I go, okay, I'll just have to figure it out and see who's done this already, who's successfully reversed their plaques. I'd heard inklings of it, but not deep dived it. So I deep dived it and put hundreds of hours over the rest of that year into understanding everything about reversing heart disease. And it actually came to me very quickly. And it's a funny story, because a company that I sold a corporate wellness program to 10 years earlier in my life, when I was 45-ish, a person who was on the selection committee for choosing the corporate wellness program at Wausau Papers, a client of mine, wound up being on Ivor Cummings' Fat Emperor podcast, all about heart disease. And he had gone to Mayo 15 years earlier and gotten a scan. And they said, "Oh, you're about to die. You have all this plaque." And but he has 2 PhDs, and he didn't take his doctor's advice of getting divorced, moving to the beach, and selling surf wax and enjoying his last 2-3 years of life. He jumped into 16,000 or 15,000 hours of reading studies over the next 3 years, and he kind of engineered what protocol would be to, and he reversed a score around 900 and took it down to 0 and had 30 CT heart scans in that time, which is a lot of radiation. But he goes, "I needed to show and document what I did." So I came across that, and then I put that protocol in and thought, well, this is the best that there is out there. And but there wasn't at that time did I have a great way of understanding quantifying soft plaque unless you were in a catheterization lab in a hospital, and they go in and if they're going to place a stent, they can view with the camera in the artery, see the calcified and the soft plaque. But you have to go to catheterization in most circumstances to understand soft plaque. And then you might also have to put dye in there to get contrast and everything. So anyhow, so that was kind of the story of discovering I had heart disease. And those are the 2 different kinds of plaque that exist. And then you're probably going to ask me about my soft plaque and where all that went.
But before we talk about reversing your calcium score, let's just clarify. At 45, your score was a 0. And then 10 years later, you were 2 something, you said?
268.
268. So what was your diet like in that 10 years?
Well, to a degree, you could say somewhat standard American diet. But, my wife used to look at me and say, because having been somewhat health conscious and then spending 10 years in the corporate wellness disease management, and I had to be certified as a coach, just like our RNs who coached our employees and spouses. This is the coach certification book. So I became obese while being a certified health coach, just not a practicing health coach, practicing tennis coach. I coached people in lots of sports for lots of years, but I just never coached health. But I was conscious and I understood what they say to do. Let's summarize it. Eat chicken, eat rice, eat broccoli, walk another mile. I mean, calorie in, calorie out, low fat, that was what the mantra has been for the last 50 years. And for much of even 150 years. But yeah, so it was the stress eating at night that got to me. And that would have been a sleeve of Oreos, a sleeve of Chips Ahoy, dunking them in milk and eating them right through, half a bag of Cheetos, or eating some ice cream, things like this. That's what set me off. And that's what put me into obesity issues and led to part of the factors of the heart disease. I understand it much deeper. And so I won't only attribute to that. It was stress. And people have stress in their lives. There's no way of getting around it. And we've had stress as long as we've been humans living on this planet. And guess what? Our kids and future generations are going to continue to have stress. So you got to know how to manage your stress. You got to know how to have proper sleep. And the easiest way to sabotage your sleep is eating a shitload of crap right before going to bed. Welcome to destroying your health.
And there's some people out there that would have you believe that red meat is what causes calcification. So I thought you were going to tell me that you started eating 6 steaks a day and that's why your calcium score went up so high.
I think actually if I was eating 6 steaks a day, I would never have the opportunity or the inclination to stress eat at night. Now knowing what I know and understand. And yeah, there are people out there, and just like there's a story, and this is nothing against anybody or any religious persuasion, but there's an analogy out there that you can find a justification for anything in the Bible. You can find a justification for anything in the medical literature. There is enough information that somebody can hang their hat on something or misconstrue it or take it out of context or make it like it's the end of the world when it's a tiny little, pimple on a flea's butt instead of monumental real science. So it's, and almost everything we've demonized over the last 50, 60 years winds up being the healthiest things that you can do, that I've reversed my heart disease, my metabolic syndrome, my arthritis, my BPH, my tinnitus, all with tinnitus, hearing, ringing in the ears. It's by focusing on what's been demonized that saved me. And now hundreds of people I've helped as well. So,
so let's talk about reversing heart disease, because that sounds like impossible. We've never been taught that that's even possible. So when was your last calcium score?
Well, okay. Well, we're going to talk about that in kind of two different ways. So, so as I mentioned, I found Patrick, this guy that worked at Wausau Papers, and he took his 900 down to a 0. And he came on Ivor Cummings' Fat Emperor podcast, and I watched this, and I was just mesmerized because it was like within a month of me learning about my CAC score. I had now been working back in the disease management industry, and the guy who hired me, who I used to compete against we were at 2 different other companies at the time, years before that, 10 years when I became a certified coach, just not a practicing coach. He goes, Brett, you and I have the best relationships with the brokers and consultants out in California. So we're going to go do a week-long trip and sell our kidney disease management company stuff out there. And I go, great. And so on our 3rd day, he goes, okay, well, today I've got a 10 o'clock appointment at this heart disease company, a diagnostic test company. And so you can drop me there and take the car to a restaurant and work, or jump on your computer, do whatever you want to do, and I'll call you when I'm done. Or if you want to sit and hear about this new heart test, you're welcome to come in with me. And I'm like, you honestly thought I would have potentially? He goes, yeah, I knew you weren't going to turn this down because I know how obsessed you are. And right when I got hired and I found out I had the score, the 268 score, I told him about it because we both were wellness warriors from from competing companies in the past. And he's 6 years younger. He went and got a scan, and he had a score too. And so he came across a month earlier this diagnostic test at an employee benefits conference. There was a booth there, and he had it done. And so the founder, the doctor who founded this company and test, 15 years of research, was going to explain his results to him. So I went in and I learned and I heard about this, and I'm listening for about 35, 40 minutes. And Dr. Harrington is explaining Jim, my boss's score. And what this is a way, this blood test, the pulse, PULS test, can quantify what the calcium score couldn't. The calcium score finds the calcified. The CT heart scan finds the calcified plaque, can't see the soft plaque, just like it doesn't look at seed tissue. And so this test is a blood test, and it quantifies the amount of soft plaque that you have in your body. And it calculates a heart age for you. It tells you, okay, this is the amount of plaque and disease that somebody that's healthy would have at X age. And it also says whether your disease is progressing or whether you're in a healing phase, because I won't go into all the reasons. But and so he just turned to me. He says, Brett, you've been quiet sitting there. I go, yeah, I'm just trying to take this all in. So I go, so you're telling me you got a venipuncture blood draw that quantifies the soft plaque, shows whether it's progressing or healing, and you quantify that also with a heart age. He goes, wow, great elevator speech. I go, next words out of my mouth, do you have a phlebotomist here? He goes, do you want one of these? And then Jim goes, yeah, Brett's got a calcium score of 268. And the doctor looked at me, raised his eyebrows. I go, yeah, I realize I'm in the middle of intermediate risk with this. And so I go, absolutely, I want to see what's going on. I said at that moment, I go, I found protocol back in May, and it's now end of August. And so I've been applying a protocol. I'm hoping to reverse my heart disease. And so anyhow, so he looked at me confused, believing like I was crazy for thinking that I could, which makes perfect sense. That's where most in healthcare is at this point in time. So anyhow, with all of that, they draw blood. 2 hours later, we leave there. 2 weeks later, the three of us get on a Zoom call together. He reads back my results and he says, well, you already knew that you had the heart disease from your heart scan and your calcified plaque. And he goes, God, I wish we would have done one of these 9 months ago on you before you lost the 115 pounds to have a baseline on when you were probably at your sickest point. And I go, yeah, that would have been great. He goes, but I got to tell you something. Whatever you're doing and have been doing, keep doing it, because you are in a major healing mode. So he kind of went in and explained the part of the test that shows that. And I wasn't familiar enough with those metrics, and they're things I had never seen before. But I just took his word that, I'm healing, and I expected to be healing. And in the protocol, being in a ketogenic diet is like the base level, the first thing before you talk about any supplements and exercise and other different and fixing your sleep and all the other stress things. So anyhow, so I tucked that away. And 3 months later, I'm back in a Planet Fitness, lifting before going to work. And I hear a podcast, and because I made sure I got through all of and stayed current with Ivar's Fat Emperor podcast, all on heart disease for the most part, and metabolic health. And he's interviewing a cardiologist from Australia. And the cardiologist says, and Ivar goes, this guy has done more CT heart scans than anybody else in the world, especially, we know for Australia, but we're assuming in the world. And the guy's talking about it and all, and he goes, but I've come across this newer test out of America called the pulse cardiac test. And it's just freaking amazing what it can do. And we can see whether people are healing or progressing. And so we can do this every 3 months and help them figure out what's going on. So I'm like, that's the test I just did in August. I go, that's great. So I started talking to a buddy of mine, and on the beginning where you talked about introducing me, that I have 2 podcasts. I have mine, which is with my name there, My Metabolic Life website will take you to my podcast. And then I have a second one I co-host with a cardiologist by the name of Dr. Ryan Cooley. And we're somewhat lifelong friends since being teenage tennis guys together, growing up being tennis players and then tennis instructors. And we competed as doubles partners in men's tournaments. I started playing a lot of pickleball with him and platform tennis over the last year and a half. And before I even went to California, we're on a court together, and his brother, who's on the court with us, goes, Brett, did you hear about Ryan's heart attack? And Ryan's like standing right here, and I'm, because we're warming up playing pickleball together. And I go, when did you have a chance to have a heart attack? I've just not seen you for only 6 weeks. You've had a heart attack. You're back on a court already. Explain this to me. And then after the match, I'm like, what are you going to do different? What's going on with you? And what is your research leading you to? Hoping that he's found the same stuff I found. And he goes, well, Sean's already been vegetarian. We both decided, because we have major family history. I knew who their dad was because I've known them for 40 years or 35 years at this point, and died of a heart attack. And every male coolie in their family back to the potato famine never made it past 58 without dying from a heart attack. And that's one of the reasons why Ryan became a cardiologist himself. And here now, back in 19, when he was 53 years old, he's 58 now, he just had his first heart attack. But he never looked big and heavy like I used to look. And so he goes, well, we're going vegan. And I go, well, I could see where you could try to do it that way, but I think there's better ways to go than this. And he thought I was just crazy. So I started sharing studies over a couple of weeks and a couple of months. And anyhow, this is good and relevant to the story and why I have 2 channels. And it's all heart disease focused. So Ryan, after 4 or 5 months of me kind of telling him that I think he's nuts for going vegan. Goes to the state leading lipidologist, cholesterol doctor, who doesn't accept insurance, $500 cash per hour. He does a 4-hour appointment, half-day appointment with her. He's a cardiologist. He can afford it. He is in there, and they get to the point where they start talking about lifestyle and diet. He goes, well, that's all wired. I got that fixed. I'm vegan. I don't eat meat, fish, and eggs. And the lipidologist looks at him and goes, why are you avoiding the most nutrient dense bioavailable food you can eat?
Yes.
And coming out of a lipidologist's mouth out of anybody, you would not expect that.
Right.
That floored me. And he goes, but I'm eating all the whole healthy grains. And she goes, that's what fucks you up. That's what screws up your cholesterol and spikes your insulin and glucose and all of this stuff. And he makes the kind of a comment. He goes, well, God, you're sounding like my friend Brett. She goes, well, who's Brett? Well, he's a lifelong tennis friend of mine. And she goes, well, what's he do? Well, he's been in healthcare sales most of his life. And she just looks at him and goes, you know, it's nuts. Salespeople can figure this stuff out, but you cardiologists are all lost in the woods. And so that hit him in the heart and in the head, and was a major kind of wake-up call, reconfirming everything that I had been sharing for months. So now, right when I say I listened to this Australian doctor in November, we fast forward back to there, and we're at a charity racket event, and he says, Brett, come here, I got to tell you something. I've been holding out on you for about 2.5 months. He tells me about going to see this lipidologist and the aha moment he had there. And he goes, so I started kind of following your protocol and what you've been saying since August. And he goes, in the last 2.5, within 6 weeks, I completely reversed all my blood chemistries, and they look better than I have since I was 25 years old. And he goes, so everything that you said is right, and everything that I said was wrong. And for a doctor to admit that to anybody, he didn't have to say anything. He could have just gone on, started correcting himself, and never had a mea culpa with me, saying that, giving me credit for helping him out with some of this stuff. So then I go, wow, I just started writing a guide on all of this. My last year journey, because it was now a year since I started all of this and learned about this. He goes, well, share it with me. And I go, well, it's only 12 pages. I think it's going to be a lot more. And so get up to about 50. I started sharing it with him. It turned out to be a 68-page guide. And he went and took it and rewrote it, took out all the resources and the references. And he was still not nowhere near where he is now, 6 years later or 5 years later at this point. Because he's eats pretty much close exactly like I do now. But he was still kind of phasing out of that plant-based mentality stuff and still believe we should have a huge amount of our plate with veggies on it. But he rewrote it, gave it to the compliance department at the largest healthcare system here in Wisconsin that he worked at. And they approved it, and he started handing it out to all of his heart patients. And he says to me, oh my God, I've never had success like I've had since I've been sharing this information, and since I've had my epiphany and you've had your epiphany. And I go, well, you got to hear about this pulse cardiac test. So I get him set up with one. He never does it. It's now a year later from my first pulse cardiac score. And I went and got a second calcium score. So this is part of your question. And I found out that before getting a second pulse test, the total cardiac calcium score went up like 3%, just a very small amount. But the artery that had the smallest amount, 40 in it, wiped out completely. And as you get deep into all of this, you realize that you don't necessarily immediately start just pulling things out. And there could be things I needed to refine, pulling all the calcium out, the soft and the hard calcified. And usually there's amount that's in transition from soft moving to calcified, and that can raise your score a little bit. But I was cleaned out one of the arteries completely. The other two were almost the same, just a very little bit up. And I could rationalize and understand why that is and could be. Then 3 weeks later, I do the pulse cardiac test, and Ryan does one too. And we're on now Zoom call together with the doctor from California. And he goes, Dr. Cooley, we're going to first go through Brett's year-over-year results. This will help you see more information about all of this and understand this better. And we're going, and so he goes, he turns to me, then goes, Brett, what have you been doing last year? Now, it's been a year. He's talked to hundreds of people since he had seen me a year ago. Didn't remember that I said I had a protocol or thought I could reverse this kind of stuff. And he goes, I go, why? Why are you asking? He goes, well, you in the last year, you reversed 85% of the soft plaque in your body.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That's what I was planning on. And I'm all fired up. And I go, well, if you might remember, I told you a year ago I had a protocol that I had been doing for 4 months before all of this. And, you know, a lot of it's steeped in understanding ketosis and living in the state of nutritional ketosis. And there's a couple supplements that in case I wasn't topped off enough that I put in there for a period of time until I test to know that I'm topped off. And I practice other things. I do stress management. I have great sleep. I do resistance training. And he's just like, I've never seen anybody do this, because when I said it also gives you a heart age, when I was 55, he told me I had the heart of a healthy 83-year-old. But then on this year over year, I was back to a healthy 63-year-old. I dropped 20-year heart age in 1 year and got rid of almost all of my soft plaque. And I knew I got rid of some of my calcified plaque. And so to give you the truly honest answer, I kept getting, so the next day I called the Pulse Cardiac company, because Ryan's like, this is an amazing test. We don't know any of these things, these metrics that they're using in here in cardiology. And so I called them up and said, are you guys hiring? I go, I live in Wisconsin. They go, we're looking for somebody in Wisconsin. Within 48 hours, I became the sales rep for the Pulse Cardiac test.
Cool.
In Wisconsin. And here's the sales binder for it and admin and how to implement the test and everything. And I can show you my scores in year over year and where it is if you ever want to do that. But no, I knew that I knew that I had proven the process and the protocol to a degree. And so since then, I didn't want to overly subject myself to, like what Patrick did, 30 CT heart scans, because there's radiation that comes with all of that.
Right.
And I now felt secure. And Ryan's like, yeah, I wouldn't go get more CT scans right away. You know, every 5 years, go get one, see what it looks like. And so I haven't gone back for another one of those yet, but the heart scan kept improving. But unfortunately, this was 2020 that I started working there, and we were steep in COVID, and doctors weren't seeing their own patients, let alone yet sales reps from heart tests that they don't understand and they don't think could possibly have any ramification of anything. And the company wound up going under the summer of 2020, kind of as I was there about 9-10 months or so. It was great. I love doing it. It's a test that needs to come back because there's great science and validation behind it. But I just now, from then, summer 2020 until now, I just keep trusting that I'm doing great. And in another year or so, I'll go get another scan and see where I'm at. But I did on my channel, my Metabolic Life channel, I interviewed a nurse from Illinois called Laura Russell. And she, in 3 years of lion diet, red meat, salt, and water, reversed and showed on her calcium scores a 386 score down to 0.
Wow.
So, you know, and I pay attention to a lot that's going on out there. So I'm pretty deep into all of this. I put thousands of hours into heart disease. Over here, there's a number of heart books. In fact, also one from somebody who was on the stage with us, Dr. Stephen Hussey. He's got one here.
Yep.
And so no, I like to think that I'm pretty solid on understanding things. And the biggest thing moving forward is I've broken a bunch of other doctors' brains, like I broke Ryan Cooley's. And he sent about 3 years ago, he moved to Utah and is practicing at Intermountain Health out there. And so we do an educational podcast, and a lot of it's on heart disease type topics. And we just recorded one Sunday night that I got to get out in the next day or so. And that'll be either number 6 or number 7 of that. But once you explain to the doctors what was missing from their medical training and that they don't understand, they're not taught the proper context of ketosis. They're only taught the dangers of diabetic ketoacidosis. They're not taught that every baby's born in ketosis, that pretty much all through human existence we lived. There wasn't enough product and enough garbage around to knock us out of ketosis until about 1910. It started happening. And guess what? 1920 is when heart disease started first being reported.
Exactly.
So the vegetable oils, the sugars, the grains, changing our grains, there, and there's chemicals and everything. There's so many different things. It's very multifactorial. You can't just focus it on one little thing. And that's where you said you got to help people find the type of an amount of ketosis to solve what they got to get going. And that's exactly what I do too. You got to find where they are, how metabolically broken they are, and how emotionally ready they are to attack and understand, because they might be very tied up in an identity standpoint of, well, I can't eat animals. That's being a murderer. I am hardcore vegan. And I'm like, we can work with that. Verta Health, Dr. Sarah showed with vegan, you can achieve ketosis and make these things happen and work. So with all of that, it's all a spectrum. You figure out where people need to be. But anyhow, so that's what I've done with the heart disease and lived it professionally also. Happy to answer anything else you have on heart disease.
Well, I'm sad to hear that the pulse test no longer exists, because as you're talking about, I'm saying to myself, I don't know how much it costs, but I want to get one done. So that's a shame. Hopefully that'll come back.
I really hope and pray that it does, because it is so needed for the world. Because just with a simple blood test, if you just did it at 25, 30, 35, 40 at routine physicals, you can find it before it becomes a problem, and we could eliminate all of this. Absolutely.
Yeah. I also want to congratulate you, because you said several times that you lost 115 pounds, and that's a great accomplishment. And I also want to congratulate you for reversing heart disease. It's amazing. I'm really happy for you.
I'm very happy for me too. And it helps create the steel will of saying, I can go out and help others now and pay this forward, because people like Dr. Sarah, I'm backwards here. When I'm on your side of the thing, I'm in the mirror thing, so I never know which hand to raise now.
When I was a guest on your show, I'm trying to point to the logos that were behind me, and I was on the wrong side.
It's freaking me out. I was a guest with Carrie Mann yesterday on his podcast, Homestead How, and I was doing the same thing. I'm pointing to the wrong places, but no. So thank you. I'm thrilled that I've been able to do this. I'm thrilled. You go to my website there, mymetaboliclife.com. You're going to read some testimonials of people I've helped over the 6 years that I've been doing this. And a lot of those people were from the first 6 years when I was just part-time helping people based on what I knew and now understood. Now I'm trying to make it a full-time gig.
So you've mentioned several times about a protocol that you were doing. Can we talk about that? How did you reverse your heart disease?
Absolutely. Well, as I also said, I think once or twice, that Patrick understood, and he was because he was a big kind of like collegiate and youth hockey player, and he's even older than me, and I don't know, because I missed all of this. He said, when you get into the science of physical performance, you realize the benefit of running on fat and being in ketosis. He goes, but ketosis is hugely important for this. And when I heard that, I'm just like, yes, because I had just been living in ketosis for 4 months now and was on my way to the 115 pounds. So I go, well, I can eat like this forever. And frankly, this is exactly how most of humanity ate for the last 2,000 years. So I go, not a problem. So I also lightly mentioned that, you can go and get do some testing of where your vitamin and mineral levels are at inside of your body, where where you are for vitamin K, which is critical, for vitamin C, and just everything. And so there's a list of like 8 to 12 different supplements that you might need to take until your diet starts creating that base level of nutrition that's going to get you across the finish line and maintain you there. Most people, because the standard of American diet is so nutritionally deficient, and even some of vegan diet require supplementation to make it work. You have to. So it took me like hours, like 30. I watched everything I could find on Patrick on YouTube until he finally had one where he went through the whole list. He goes, people keep asking. So he opened up, he had like a tackle box with all his different, he loads his pills into a tackle box for the month. And then here's what I take each day. And so, vitamin K is part of it. Vitamin C is part of it. Coenzyme Q10 is a part of it. A B complex is a part of it, and others. And anybody who wants it, I'm going to do a video on this shortly, but until I get there and create a blog and just put it out on my website, if anybody wants it between now and then, I'll email it to anybody, because I wrote it all down. I've been sharing it with people for free, the last 5 years. But then managing stress, if you don't have now, yes, you and I both understand what ketosis does from stress standpoint for the brain, and how even it can make you and take you off all of the agitation that's happening. But also just, be mindful of, the seasons, be mindful of the sun, get sun, vitamin D. If your D levels are in the toilet, everything's going to be in the toilet. D is huge. And I was taking 10,000 a day in the summer, international units, and 20,000 in the winter. And I don't do that anymore because my D levels are great, and I get enough from the meat, fish, and eggs that I'm eating to kind of, and I'm outside a lot, and I ground. And he didn't have grounding in there, but I think now, 6 years later, with all the stuff I've seen, if I shared it with him, he would say, yes, you should be grounding, you should be getting. But yeah, you want to get sun. You get 20,000 international units of sun by being with, let's just say, bathing suit, skin exposure in a half hour in between 10 and 2 in the day. So, so that's pretty much the protocol in a nutshell. Don't over exercise. Don't be so cardio that you're so ultra endurance, because you can create a lot of reactive oxygen species doing all that. It's oxidative stress is not a friend, and it will screw up your cholesterol and take your healthy normal LDL and help convert it into small dense LDL. There's a number of facets to it all. But in the guide, I give like, here's 4 of Patrick's talks. Here's the one where he does it. I took the screenshot if he's got like this 12-headed dragon, that here's the 12 things you got to pay attention to on all of this. So I've got that as a separate document with the Word document to put it all in there and let them go on their own journey, because I don't think anybody should ever just take anything that I say for granted. Go check my sources, because I provide all my sources and all of my stuff. And that's what it's all about, because they're going to say, Brett, you are a public relations major and a marketing minor. You might have spent 30 years in and around the healthcare world, but you're not a doctor. I go, I know, but it's crazy how I seem to be able to fix all these things that people's doctors can't fix for them. And I'm not fixing them. I'm just teaching them, stop poisoning yourself, start giving yourself a healing, nutritional diet, let your body do the healing. So, I don't deprescribe people off of things. I don't tell them to stop taking things, but I do. And on my website, there's a blog that says, and the first thing I have to talk to with somebody is, if you are on medications, we need to know what they are and you need to communicate with your doctor. And if you're on a blood pressure medication, I want you to go to Walgreens and buy a blood pressure cuff, or order it on Amazon. If you're taking if you're on metformin or glucose diabetes type stuff, we need to either get you a CGM, or you need to get a Keto Mojo like I have right there, and finger prick and test. Because once, just like we said, the mental health stuff, the brain starts calming and everything starts working, your body starts healing incredibly. And once you remove the toxins and the poisons that are causing the base insulin resistance, and the insulin resistance is coming down, and somebody becomes insulin sensitive, the amount of drugs they needed when they were insulin resistant is different than what they need as they're healing and then when they're healed. And it's going to push you way beyond normal. So they can go from hypertension to hypotensive, hyperglycemia to hypoglycemic. And you could pass out, you could black out, you could, stand up and hit your head because you're over medicated, just taking the same amount of medication you might have been on 2 weeks ago. So we need to, every couple of days, be communicating with the doctor on what might need to change. Because if suddenly you were prescribed and stayed at 140, 150 with your meds on a blood pressure, 150 over 90, and now you're at 115 over 70, they are going to have you start titrating back on those medications, or you're in danger. So that's the thing that we have to be aware of. But I never tell anybody go off of anything. And if their doctor's not receptive to helping them, I've got lists of doctors that they can do virtual calls with, that can do things just like Dr. Cho, who was on the stage with us in DC. There's lots of resources out there.
I love all the parallels here between heart disease, heart health, physical health, and mental health, because there's a lot of people that are going on a ketogenic diet for their psychiatric conditions. And if they're on psychiatric meds, they can become more sensitive to those as well and need to work with their doctor to lower them. I know for me, in the past, the drugs that worked best for me were anti-seizure meds. And I used to be on 150 to 200 milligrams of Lamictal. And then when I tried to take Lamictal again a few years ago, when I was in ketosis, once I tried to go past 50, I could no longer tolerate it. I had terrible anxiety. And my psychiatrist at the time actually argued with me about it and said, there's no way that you're feeling any benefits or any side effects. It's not possible at such a low dose. And he wanted me to get up to the 150 or the 200. That would be considered a therapeutic dose, but I could not tolerate it. I stayed at 50 for a few months before I ended up titrating back off of it. And you're speaking a lot of my love languages here. You're talking about grounding and sunlight, and we're going to get into circadian biology.
That's okay. Absolutely.
I love it.
But they're all they're part of the protocol, and they're part of what I teach the protocol with. So that's why some of it jumps out of order.
It's so much more than just changing your diet and what you put in your mouth. And as one of my former guests puts it, Hannah Warren, she says, it's metabolic therapies are a holistic approach. It's so much more than what you eat and your diet.
Absolutely. Now the diet though, so if we say that somebody has a condition that they're targeting, to hit that target and knock out their condition, maybe the biggest arrow in the quiver that they have, if they're going to draw a bow and try to kill this thing, is probably the diet. But for some people, it's only 60% or 40% of what's going on, because you can create insulin resistance through toxic blue light exposure, which is happening all around us. So our kids that grew up not knowing anything but a Wi-Fi router being all over in their house, having blue light TVs and blue light LED bulbs, where historically we weren't exposed to that until we replaced all our incandescent bulbs and started living on screens without filters and blue blocking glasses. So it's the terrain our kids are growing up in is just toxic.
And that's why, so some people, like maybe friends and family, think that we're crazy because we are now a no Wi-Fi household. I shut the Wi-Fi off last winter because who knows what it's doing to Samantha's brain at 8 years old. We haven't been exposed to these things.
And we don't know yet.
No. And yeah, we have our red light glasses that we wear at night when when I'm on a screen, a TV or a computer, we wear the red light glasses, and I'm trying to protect us as much as I can from them. I'm really glad you mentioned the Wi-Fi thing, because like I said, there are people that think I'm just absolutely nuts for doing that.
That's okay. I no longer get fazed by people thinking I'm nuts, because 90% of people that I come across in life now think I'm nuts, just as
Yeah.
anything that I say right now today in 2016 or 17 and before, I would have thought somebody saying the same exact things were nuts. You can learn things and you can't unsee them once you learn them. And especially when they reverse your heart disease, your mental health, and all the different things that happen. I mean, how could somebody argue with you about this when what it's done for you personally, right?
Exactly. And people think that I'm some wacky nut job. I'm walking around barefoot.
Well,
um,
it's because we both have horns and ears. So if I go like this, my tennis rackets look like Mickey Mouse ears, and you've got the horns from the cow behind
yeah.
you. So we're just crazy. We're just crazy people here. This must be some form of a cult that you and I are in, Stephen. But no, I mean, I'm thick-skinned. In fact, it just happened to me last night. Somebody that was my neighbor for most of my childhood, and friend till, and still friend. But he's just like, you think you know shit, you don't know shit. He was drunk. We were at a bar, and I'm just like, okay, not everybody's open to the message right now. It's part of life.
Well, so let's talk about the connection between mental health and heart health. And I believe it boils down to mitochondria. So what role do you think mitochondria play in overall health, and why are they a focal point for you?
Yeah, this one caught me off guard about probably 3.5 years ago. So almost halfway into this journey, because at first I was just so enamored with ketones and ketosis and needed to learn everything I could about that, and thought, well, that guide that I wrote is eventually going to get turned into a ketone ketosis book. And then 2.5 to 3 years ago, I started going down the rabbit hole of realizing that, oh, the ketones are also interacting as fuel for the mitochondria and a signaling molecule, but the mitochondria are also signaling mechanisms and kind of the quarterback in the brain of what's going on, even though there's a nucleus in the cell with DNA in it that every cell has. Mitochondria have whole other DNA of their own, and they are kind of dictating epigenetically what's going on inside of our body. So this is a good way to start with this, is that a lot of things we hang that now people have and can be born with and have genetic issues that didn't come from their diet. They could be born with it. Might have been the mother's diet in the womb. It could be all different kinds of things, and there could just be genetic. Some people lost the genetic lottery. So I never say anything across the board. People say, oh, Brett's saying genetics have nothing to do with this. No, what I'm saying is that many things, because I was I was heavy duty in genetics that summer that the pulse test went away. One of my sales reps, we were allowed when we were selling that to be like a manufacturer's rep and sell other tests as well, and other things. And this one woman from Texas had this genetic test that she was doing, and she was getting me trained up on to be a genetic kind of report reader. And it's a very sophisticated test. And just really quick, this is the DNA that you would rub inside your mouth, get the swab, and send it in, and they get your results, and it comes back, and it's one of the most comprehensive genetic tests out there. But because you have genes, because when they saw, now I told you my mom was bipolar, my grandpa was bipolar, and we've got lots of mental health all around the family. She's reading my report to me, and she's going, oh. We got to the mental health kind of page and those snips from the DNA. She's like, oh, Brett, there's a lot that because you always seem upright, happy and well adjusted. And I go, well, I used to be in a place where I could get in a funk. And there was a time where I started taking an SSRI, but I hated how it made me feel, because I told the doctor I had some depression for a while. But then since I've been doing this, boom, it's all lifted, it's all gone. But so in the mitochondria, and this also comes into, I'll work in the saturated fat into this. So once you start getting into how your body creates energy, uses energy, and what implicates the energy that your body has at use. So food gets boiled down in my world to two things. It's either protein, which which breaks down to amino acids, are the building blocks for us to create new protein, repair cells, create new cells. We replace our whole body, every cell in your body over 7 years. The other thing is that it can be energy source. And so inside of, I use my fist here. I'm going to use this one now because it's backwards. So the way we have 5 knuckles, there's 5 complexes in the electron transport chain inside of the mitochondria. When you're always running on glucose and energy source, so it's not protein, it's not breaking down amino acids, it comes in complex 1. It's where 95% of the reactive oxygen species happens inside of your metabolism. Fatty acids and ketones come in complex 2. They bypass compost 1. They come in here, are clean burning. They create anywhere from 3 to 6 times the amount of ATP, the end product, by the time it comes out of that mitochondria. And then, so the whole process, so the way I can say it is, it's like if you have a dual engine that runs gas and runs on a battery, when you're running on the battery, that's complex 2, your fatty acids and your ketones. There's nothing coming out of the exhaust. Thus, there's no reactive oxygen species, more layman's term, free radicals going on, that everybody's overdosing on antioxidants trying to cap down their free radical damage. But when you're running on complex 2, you're not on the battery. There's nothing coming out the back end. You're not ruining your LDL and turning them from large buoyant to small dense and all of this. So it's a matter of which inflammation level are you going to be doing. And this happens in your brain as well, because it's just the red blood cells that don't have, for the most part, that don't have mitochondria. Everything else has mitochondria. So you're either burning clean fuel, which are in the brain, it's ketones, because the fatty acids don't go past the blood-brain barrier. So it's ketones and glucose. Well, now the brain loves ketones, and your heart loves fatty acids and ketones. And when cancer patients are doing PET scans to see how the cancer is happening in the body, because it shows up wherever the glucose is happening and burning, if they're doing the Press Pulse Cancer Treatment Center from Thomas Seyfried, and others out there, which is a ketogenic way of fasting and ketosis adjunctive procedure for treating the cancer, suddenly you don't even see the heart on the PET scan because it's just 100% burning fats and ketones. Same thing with other parts of the body that you would normally see a lot of glucose because you're living in ketosis. It just works. So my biggest point of all of this is that, and then you get in the sun as well, and the red light comes through to the body and it penetrates through your body. The light for the suntan doesn't go 10 inches down because that's only out from 10 to 2 in the afternoon. But the red light is out whenever there's light, and it supercharges your mitochondria. And even the people getting the low amount of ATP, maybe 20 ATP per molecule instead of 90 to 200 you get from fats. Glucose will only give you 20, but it'll at least supercharge that up to 60 from that. So you just get that much more energy because the brain is so stabilized, because the whole system becomes stabilized. You're not looking or thinking that you need, where's my next energy hit coming from? Because we walk around with subcutaneous fat in our body. Most people have weeks to months, and obese people might have months to years worth of energy walking around on their frame. But that's really one of the big things going on within the mitochondria. How much toxicity is the fuel you're burning? And you are 90% fat. You create no reactive oxygen species because the protein is all being used for regenerating your cells and building new cells, and whatever damage repair is going on and repair is going on. That's what you're doing with your 10% protein there. The 90% fat is stabilizing your mood, you're not toxifying yourself through the mitochondria. And it's not that the mitochondria want to toxify us. It's just it's an input, programming, ones and zeros, ones and zeros. Zeros do different things than ones. You put ones in, you get reactive oxygen species. You put zeros in, you don't. You're putting zeros in. You found a solution. Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing. That was a great explanation. You threw a lot of sciencey stuff out there, and now I'm following you every step of the way, and I love it. But I always think of people like my parents who are listening to my shows and what they're going to be able to understand. So I take things from Chris Palmer and from Hannah Warren, and they would say that as far as mitochondria, like if it was a question on a science test, what are mitochondria? We'd be taught that the answer would be that they're the powerhouses of the cell. But Chris Palmer would say they're much more than just the powerhouses. Like if the analogy is a computer, it's not just the power cord. It's also the motherboard. It's what's running and making everything happen. And Hannah had said that most of our problems are from two things with our mitochondria. It's from quality and quantity. So for quantity, some of us have too few, and that's what leads to psychiatric issues and other illnesses. And as far as quality, they just don't process energy correctly. And I believe for me that is what is the case. That's what's going on with me. And I just need such a high level of fat and ketones for my mitochondria to run as smoothly as possible. I need like the highest quality fuel possible out there. And that's why the 90-10 works so well for me.
Well, you mentioned Hannah. Does she go more higher fat too, or like up to that epilepsy 80-90% levels, or where?
No, she does a vegetarian keto.
Okay.
And I believe her fat is more moderate, like in the mid 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She has bipolar 1, and she had 3 psychotic breaks. She was hospitalized for months at a time with very serious psychosis. She was held down and injected with antipsychotics. But the ketogenic diet, the way she does it works. It works for her. She found what works.
No, so I am not, even though I know what you do. I know you're 90-10, and I have categorized myself as a ketovore, and I prefer to use the word nutrivore. And I came into that really in my first quarter of doing this in 2019. It wasn't my word. I'm sure I found it somewhere, but I just loved it because I just focus on the most nutritionally dense bioavailable foods. Through time, that has moved me more from having asparagus and broccoli at all my meals or whatever to most of my meals I don't have any veg. And as with my mea culpa that I provided about lapses in the last year, I've been full carnivore since August 1, so no coffee, no berries. Sauerkraut was part of the protocol from Patrick because there's a lot of K vitamin, MK4, MK7, K2 inside of that. So I will bring sauerkraut back in, but I've got his K supplement, so I'm not worried about it at the moment. But yeah, just what you said though, where you said mental health to heart, but it's not mental health to heart. It's just called how the body is designed to function. On what fuels do we run the best? I'm not going to tell somebody not to be a vegan or a vegetarian. I'm okay. Everybody's got to be where they've got to be, and there's ways to make it work. So just like how Hannah figured it out in a vegetarian kind of a way, that works. If it works for her both from a bipolar standpoint and from how she lives with the world around her, more power. Go knock yourself out. I'm not here to tell somebody how to live. I'm here to try to give them tools to figure out how they want to live, how can they achieve and go into remission, you could say. And I'll put these conditions that didn't exist 100 years ago for most of the population, but are now we have epidemics in every condition that didn't exist 100 years ago. And we don't have to. And so, but there's two kinds of hard. It can be hard. I don't know, Stephen, you tell me, is it hard to live with mental health and addiction issues? Is that hard?
It's damn near impossible. Life feels impossible when I'm suffering at my worst. Yes.
And what was it at first hard to give up some of your comfort foods and things like this that that you used to, I mean, before you saw the results and everything, you know, that's hard for people. People are right now where they are in their journey. That ice cream, that bagel, these are comfort foods. That chocolate, um, this is how some people turn to alcohol, some turn to sugar, some turn to both, and to numb themselves at night, to get over the hard day that they just had. But the point I'm trying to make with all of this is there's no escaping. Well, I guess you could say you have to pick your hard. And the hard from the diet stuff, you can get over all of that and soon not be missing it. But do alcoholics go through withdrawal? Absolutely. Do people, when they're coming off of certain meds, go through withdrawal? Absolutely. Um, but but once the ketones start working on the brain and the hunger signals start going in the triggers, and you learn how to navigate things, you find out that the hard isn't hard long, but the side effects of the bad diet are there forever. So you got to pick your hard and just say, and then you build a big enough why. Why do I want to make these changes? You wanted to do it for yourself. You wanted to do it for your wife. You wanted to do it for your kid. I've heard your story, and it's so powerful, and it keeps you so on the straight and narrow. I wanted to first not look like the overweight wellness guy anymore. And then I had my heart journey. I want to be around, and I want to have a relationship. I want to be at my granddaughter's weddings down the road. I don't want to miss anything. I want to be a part of everything. And so I needed, once I realized that the heart disease now was, I mean, I don't think I was imminently about to have a heart attack, but I could have potentially, if I kept the stress levels up, the poor sleep and everything else, I could have had one at, right around the corner within a year or two or three. But yeah, I mean, now that's vigilance for me to have a big why. And I can't help and pay this forward that Dr. Sarah gave me if I don't stay vigilant. And if I don't look like I'm healthy, who's going to pay attention to me?
Yeah, and like you said, it's hard. So I found ketosis by accident. I didn't just find that you could do a ketogenic diet for bipolar and one day say, okay, I'm going to try to give off this stuff. I was doing it kind of gradually and testing on myself. And I'm not going to lie, it was difficult, and it's still difficult at times. And accepting that 90-10 is my path, and that if I eat too much meat for a couple days, it can cause me problems, because I still have this old thought and this old thinking of like, well, I'm never normal. I've never fit in. And people would say I'm a carnivore because I only eat meat, but I can't even be a regular normal carnivore. There's carnivores out there that can just eat steaks all day and be fine, but I can't even be a normal carnivore. I started recently referring to myself as a lipivore because I eat high fat, and it just happens to come from animals. But that's 90% of my diet is fat. Most days it's 90%. But it is difficult, and it's unfortunately it's our lifestyles that we grew up in. It's the social aspects of it. It's the holidays. It's you
Yeah.
know, a couple weeks ago, I ended up having a bunch of candy on Halloween. We went trick or treating, and it's like the pumpkin pie that I'm gonna miss on Thanksgiving, and the cranberry sauce, and those kind of things, because they're just so deeply ingrained into my history and my past and my childhood. And this is part of the reason that I'm grateful to have discovered this while Samantha is so young, because I'm hoping to protect her from some of that stuff so that when she gets older, she's not going to have these things she needs to cling to.
Well, and people who are going to be at your channel, not everybody, but there's definitely demographics of people who are going to be, come towards your messaging on all of this because they have some of the same issues. And but a lot of people who might come to my channel have all different kinds of things, and it might just be weight. And for 5 years, when I said, like, I walked in the store and I just said poison, 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 and it didn't phase me. But I was able to, at Thanksgiving, I'd eat a little bit of cranberry with my turkey. I'd have the stuffing, and it was once a year. I had the pie. Okay. But it didn't trigger me until when I find out what can trigger me. Guess what can trigger me, Stephen?
I'm gonna guess stress.
Well, stress definitely can trigger. But here's what you would think would be benign. Cherries in season. Now, for 6 years, I was able to have a small handful of raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, strawberries with a meal every day in my ketovore, nutривore world, and it never triggered me. I could have a tiny bit of super dark chocolate, never triggered me. I opened up a bag of cherries and I tried to have a small handful of cherries, and they were and maybe it's because I had barely had cherries in 6 years, but suddenly I ate that whole bag of cherries, and then my GI tract was screwed up for 2.5 weeks. So we all have things that we can and can't moderate. We got to figure out what those are. Some people have very few to none, and God bless them. But yeah, so if somebody doesn't have the serious ramification of that child with epilepsy who's in the first 5 years of healing, or with what you're doing with mental health, and there's chance of triggering, they might need to, and they might choose, I'm going to be like this forever because I'd rather be in a couple social circumstances and give things up, because you grow a callus in that, you get tougher with that with
Of
time.
course, it gets easier as time goes on. Yeah.
But I don't tell somebody who's just trying to lose weight, who's not on medications, that they'll never be able to eat chocolate, because there's now ways, even with, because I experiment with things, and you can take 3, 4, however many scrambled eggs you want, throw it in a food processor, throw a little bit more heavy cream in there, put a pinch of allulose in there, and I put a splash of vanilla and then a half a tablespoon of cocoa powder, and you now have a chocolate mousse 30 seconds later.
I like
It's
that.
mainly eggs, tiny bit of cream, a little allulose, don't have to have that in there, splash of vanilla, but it's 98% scrambled eggs. And I've tested it off of some people. They're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So it's not like things have to. And I tell people I sandwiched and bageled my way to 115 pounds, because I was making, out of psyllium husk fiber, making rolls with almond flour and egg whites that could be hot dog or brat or sausage buns, or act like an English muffin, or just be a dinner roll. I made bagels that, instead of being a Panera 70 bagel carb, was a 4 bagel carb out of mozzarella cheese, cream cheese, and almond flour. And so, because coming out of my coaching, I understood how you have to meet people where they're at and help them gradually get to where. So now I haven't made and then there's truffles, eggs, and cheese to look like a Belgian and taste like a Belgian waffle.
Yeah. Yeah. Samantha loves truffles. I make those often.
I've only made truffles in the last year and a half, but I haven't made one since March. And so while those rolls and bagels help me transition and get to that 115 pounds and make it feel like I was still my old normal, now my new normal is, yeah, could I have those here and there? Might, on a rare occasion. And even though they only take 5 minutes to make, there's not a huge prep time on these things. And I can have, spend 2 mornings, 10 minutes prepping, and I could have a week worth of bread substitutes. But now I'm just like, I understand more about the gut microbiome. I understand more about the GI tract. I understand about leaky gut much better, irritable bowel, all these things. I realize that fiber, even though it's the third rail of whatever you want to call it, it's the most protected thing in the world, and propped as the most beneficial thing in the world. But once you slay the fiber dragon, there's nothing left to stand on what we'll say the diet wars. So I'm not against the people who want to be on the vegan vegetarian aspect of it. We all got to do what we got to do, and you got to feel good about what you're doing. But I'm much more on the 20 to 0 carb world element of it, for what it means for me and what I do with my body. but that doesn't mean that that's what somebody else has to do and that they can't down the road eat some apples and do different things once we get them to where their health is and what all their goals are being achieved.
Right. That's a great message. I'm really glad that you feel that way, because that's the same way I feel. Like I said, diet being highly individualized, it's going to be different for everybody. And people will say to me, well, I can't do what you do, but I'm like, well, you don't have to. It's my path. You mentioned a whole lot of things there, like berries and the almond flowers. And like, I've learned over time and through self-experimentation that I cannot tolerate those things. A lot of them are going to give me skin issues, but they're also going to affect my mood. And it's hard. Some of the things, like if I could do dairy, if I could do cheese, I would eat chaffles every day. I would have a chaffle bacon cheeseburger every day if I could, but I don't tolerate cheese. It creates really bad cravings and skin issues and stomach distress. And
Absolutely.
there's things like eggs that I don't even enjoy eggs, but I don't tolerate them anyway. So I wouldn't even really want those, but people don't have to do what I do. I do it because it's what works best for me. And I think I might be in a minority of people that I've been able to find that second turbo boost and how to get there. I don't think many people have tried the 90-10, and that's what I advocate for. And that's why I started the HFBO Facebook group, because there's a lot of people out there that are on Lion diet, or they're trying to do a standard keto at like a 2-to-1 ratio with their fat in the 70s, and it's just not
Yeah.
enough for them. I have found this turbo boost that gets me to a 10 plus, so that when I'm at an 8, it's not good enough anymore. I want to be at the 10 for as long as I can. So people don't need to do what I do. I do it because it's what works best for me.
Absolutely. It's just what needs to be said. And everybody's on their own journey. And while I don't want to try to hold out false hope for some people, I also realize it's a double-edged sword that, because I start talking to people about, because I have on my website a blog. It says, if you can count to 20, you can have the health and body of your youth. And it just means if you can count to 20 total carbs, and at the bottom, so the text goes through, and then at the very bottom where I say I sandwich and bageled my way to 115 pounds, I have like 12 pictures all in a collage of what my most standard meals were during that 9 months of dropping the 115 pounds. And most people would look at that and say, you're eating steak and broccoli. You're eating ribs. You're eating fish fries. You're eating salmon. There's a version of granola that I don't do much anymore for different other reasons, but you can make granola out of pecans and walnuts, some coconut, little vanilla, and such. And if you still need to have crunch in your world, but they're seeing bagels, they're seeing rolls, they're seeing burgers and brats, and, like they're used to looking at and eating them. And that helps to get somebody started, and maybe they can be successful with that forever. And they could do one of the, because like you said, a lot of people also, and people I coach, have tried, but they're, so there is Christine Sullivan. She used to be on staff at dietdoctor.com.
Okay.
And right before they brought Brett Scher on, kind of. And she's got this, and she's had a journey. And so it's for keto gatherings. So every kind of side dish and dessert you would see at normal gatherings that we all grew up with, there's a substitute here. But unfortunately, and here's where the double-edged sword comes in, where I said cherries can trigger me. Well, some people get addicted to making all these wonderful things, and then they just pig out on them and they can't stop on them. And so you have to understand what you can and can't moderate. I've got friends who can't drink. They don't think they can moderate it well, so they've stopped and they feel great. I'm like, yeah, I should not go have that high fructose Dairy Queen Blizzard because it's going to taste so good. I'm going to want another one. And yeah, I can bust off a 3-day to 4-day fast, and pretty much all of those temptations are going to be gone. But anyhow, I can answer anything else you'd like. Okay, I'll sound crazy one more time here. So one of my clients is in Pennsylvania, and so I've got a WhatsApp group, and we'll take, it's not required. Nobody has to take pictures of their meals, but as I launched my whole carnivore thing with all of this, I just, I told them what I was doing. And so I take a picture of my every plate. And sometimes it's once a day, sometimes it's twice a day. It's incredibly rare that I don't think in 6 years I've had 3 meals in a day more than 3 or 4 times. But anyhow, that's just me. But one of my clients sent a picture in the Facebook or in the WhatsApp group of a chuck roast. And so she took a 2-pound chuck roast and put it in her air fryer, and it came out and she had it all kind of sliced and it looked all kind of rare and pink and juicy. And I'm like, 6 years, I've never made a chuck roast. I was in my car at a stoplight looking at the WhatsApp when because the phone binged. And so what happened? Oh, Susan. Oh, look what Susan did. And I'm like, why have I never done a chuck roast? I pulled into Costco. I picked up a chuck roast. I threw it in my air fryer because I was going to go home and eat anyhow. And now I am like addicted to chuck roast. Since around August 10th to 12th, somewhere in there, I don't know that there's a day or more than 4 days where I haven't had a chuck roast, a 1-pound chuck roast out in it, because you just drop in the air fryer, 12 minutes, flip it over 6 more minutes, put it on your plate, drain the fat back over it out of the air fryer, salt, and it's just like the quickest, easiest thing. And I can be very repetitive with my meals, but in over 3 months now, I've had a chuck roast with at least every day and sometimes twice a day, and I can't get tired of these things. So how nuts is that?
No, it's great that you told that story, because I remember when we were prepping for my appearance on your show and we did a video call and you were in the middle of cooking a chuck steak. And so if we look at the thumbnail that I created, that
There,
is a chuck steak right there.
chuck roast, absolutely.
Chuck
So
roast, yeah, that's why I did that.
and here I am 6 years into this thing, and all of a sudden a client gives me an idea, and I'm just like, you could say obsessed with it because I've had it every day for 3 months, but it's the juiciest, most tender. I'm sure as we get now into winter, and I'll bring the slow cooker out and I'll throw it in there and do that. And we're coming into soup. I do a lot of 3 meat soups. I make my own bone broth. And so I'm sure that can go in there as well and will be just absolutely outstanding. But I guess the thing is you have to choose your hard, and hard doesn't stay hard for long once you break the habit and break the addiction. And I love what I eat. I never feel like I'm giving up anything. And I also love how quick and easy it is, and how almost there's no dishes to do with what I tend to do. Before I start eating, my dishes are down in the rack. I don't even put them in a dishwasher.
You should see how easy it gets if you ever transition to fully raw, like I've been for the past couple of months, because I'm not cooking anything. I have a cutting board and a knife, and sometimes what I do, like on a Sunday, is I'm portioning out all my food for the week, and I either have it in bowls or in bags. So when I eat, I don't even have a utensil. I just have a bag I got to throw away, or just got a bowl I got to wash. That's all there is. It's great.
You are a master. That is incredible. But no, well, who else was I watching just yesterday who was talking about raw meat also? And but no, and you've talked with Emily too, right? Emily Penton.
Yeah. Yep. And
And
she's going to be on the show next month.
that's awesome. Love her. And she went through a raw phase, and then all of a sudden she was like, nope, I need to start cooking it. So we can go through phases and things can work, and all different. There's so many ways to, no pun intended, slice and dice all of this. So
I've got 2 questions that are posed to your younger self, and they're similar, but the first is going to be related to mental or physical health in your diet. The second one is not necessarily related to health. The first one is, what is a piece of advice you'd give to your younger self before you discovered the diet? Something along the lines of how to get through the tough times.
I think the piece of advice I would have to go with there, but you have to appreciate younger and probably not paying attention, just like, if you're not ready for the message, you're not ready for the message, understanding that. But assuming I was, receptive to the message, I would just simply state, you have to understand what being fat adapted means, and you need to understand what being satiated means. And if you can understand those two things, everything else becomes easy, because I don't even think about snacking at night, whether there's stress or anxiety or not. It just doesn't come into my mind. So and that might sound basic, and I don't know if you even think that that's what I should have come up with, but you need to understand human physiology, but that's a big, broad topic. But you can get your brain around being fat adapted and satiated pretty quick.
I think that's a perfect answer, because if you had that message to your younger self when you were doing all that stress eating and putting all that weight on, it would have helped you get through the tough times.
I probably wouldn't have had 80% of the stress. I would have just handled it in a much better, there's still going to be stress, and there's still stress. Things happen. The world's not perfect, but things just roll off my back like you can't believe. And that wasn't always me. Big time wasn't me.
And that's a common theme with people who are in ketosis, that were more stress resistant. So we have the same amount of stress, we just handle it better. It doesn't affect us as bad. My second question is similar to the first, but it's not necessarily related to diet or mental health. It's just more of a life lesson. If you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Take your time. You don't have to understand it all now, but keep learning every day. Don't ever take time off from learning something new that you're interested in. You have passions, learn and understand those passions, and find ways to make them into your eventual occupation. Because there's so many people in this world that go to work and they just despise, and they're just watching the clock, and they're waiting till they can run out the door. And if your occupation is your avocation, right now, when we're doing this, when I'm interviewing people, when I'm video chatting with my coaching clients from wherever they are all over the place, it's my happy spot. I absolutely love doing this. I'm obsessed with this. I'm on a mission to change the world, but I know you are too. But don't ever look at your job as something that you got to put time into. You got to go figure out where your passions lie. Because you never get tired of learning something about your passion. And if you've got an advocacy angle into your passion, there's only so much advocacy I can have for wanting to be a better tennis player. But for being healthier and helping people achieve that, and the gratification and satisfaction you get from impacting people, I had a cardiologist tell me that I saved his life. Does that give me a little bit of yay, me? Yeah. I mean, I want to do that more.
That's amazing. Thank you. Now we come to my signature question. This is a question that encourages you to share a broader, more philosophical insight or life lesson into your experience with the ketogenic lifestyle, and hopefully provide something meaningful and potentially new even after our in-depth interview. This is what I call my fat-fueled philosophy. What's one powerful piece of fat-fueled philosophy, a life lesson, or a mantra that you've embraced on your ketogenic journey and that you think could inspire our listeners?
Okay. So there used to be a saying when I was in college and high school and younger, it was a hippie kind of a thing that was said, or what we would associate with the hippies as I was growing up. I grew up born in 63. And there used to be a saying, don't trust anybody over 30. And I'm going to play off of that. And I'm going to say, don't trust anybody. Do your own research, double check the facts, because much of what we've been told, just like I said, I broke my brain in 2018. That was me just following the dogma, following the narratives that were laid out in front of me. And so much of what the world believes about, I'll be as bold as to say, most things aren't what they appear. And so question everything. Nobody should listen to me and say, well, Brett said this, so it's gospel. That's why I've got my website. That's why I list my sources. And that's why I say, go watch these 300 videos. Let them teach you. I'm just aggregating it and giving it to you and boiling it down in bite size, because when I talked about the mitochondria, I don't try to make sure they can explain the electron transport chain. I just explain you're going to get more energy from this and you're not going to pollute yourself. And I keep it boiled down. But I don't, I guess you would say, I feel like we've all as a population been assaulted with things that are not so. And that's why we have the mental health crises. It's why we have the diabetes crisis. It's why we have the cancer crisis. It's why we have the heart disease crisis. And there's answers to everything, but you're never going to follow or find answers following the authorities.
I love that. That was a great answer. I'm going to give you a round of applause. Hopefully this is going to come out. I tried that on my last show, but for some reason the applause didn't come out. I had some kind of technical difficulty over here. No, that's great, because you don't want people to just be a sheep and follow the herd just because they're part of the herd. You gotta discover for yourself. It can be very meaningful, very impactful. And that's how I discovered that this HFBO is what works best for me, because I self-experimented and I researched and I tested. That's what you got to do.
But we're social animals, and we're silly talking monkeys, and monkeys like to travel in herds, and we like being part of groups. And I've had to learn to become very comfortable being a group of one, because I call bullshit on everything I see now, and a lot of people don't like hearing that. And because they may not understand why I call it, and it may just sound crazy, but they know the group they identify with doesn't like that thought. They don't understand why, but I'm very comfortable in my own skin. I'm very comfortable with people thinking I'm a whack job. But I wake up happy every day and I go to bed with a smile on my face. So
I like that you said group of one, because when I originally started the HFBO, it was because there was no group where I belonged. There's the lion diet that we spoke about, and they eat beef only, beef, salt, and water, which is what I do. But there's no focus on fat there. Most of them are just eating fatty cuts. They're going to be like in the low 70s, and that's not what I do. And then there are some people that are treating epilepsy, and they're doing the 4-to-1 ratio. But when you look at those diets, like through the Charlie Foundation, and they're for children, they
yeah.
do all kinds of nuts and seeds, and so that doesn't fit me either. And when I started the HFBO, I thought, well, if I'm the only member of my group, at least I have a group. I have somewhere where I belong. And now I look at it, my Facebook group, there's like almost 200 people in that group. It's actually become like a group now that I have all these members there, and we're all trying to help
being
each
in
other.
it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's been great.
Well, there's a great movie line that I'm sure you'll recognize it. If you build it, he will come, or they will come. So, it just needs somebody to be the person, the trailblazer, who's going to go out there, and you're paving new ground. And I can't give you more credit for what you're doing, because like I said, we're social animals. People don't like standing alone, don't like being different. They have big time challenges with this. Half the population's introverts and don't even want to talk to people that, most of the day or part of the day. Even they just want to go in their own little corner and live. So to be as bold of what you're doing, but I know you've got an advocacy. I know you've got a passion. I know you want to change the world. And I think you're doing an incredibly great job doing that. And I can't, give you more applause. I can't push the button, but it's what you're doing, Stephen, is just amazing. What is happening with the metabolic revolution, we hope takes off. Lots has happened in the month since we left Washington, D.C. Things are going to be radically different in Washington, D.C. I'm not going to get political on all of this, but this was the first presidential debate or presidential election where health ever even came up as a platform of anything. So, and the side that brought it up won. So we'll see what comes with all of that. But But it's, Jess Apple had an idea, and she became a group of one, and we came and joined her tribe. And now the metabolic revolution, we're all like brothers and sisters with each other, right? Um, and because we all have that common passion and advocacy, we know what it can do. We want to change the world.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words. Thank you very much. It's interesting because when I started this, I thought that I was the only person going to the butcher and getting beef fat and eating a big pile of beef. And by coming out and being on social media, I met people like Emily, who was doing that a couple of years ago. She has videos out where she's eating this big pile of raw beef fat and raw meat. And in the HFBO Facebook group, there's people all over the world in there. Russia, Germany, Australia, Canada, and they're all going to their butchers, and they are either already doing it or they're doing it now because of the group. And we're in there posting our pictures of the beef fat that we're getting from our butchers, and it's just amazing to have other people doing the same thing I'm doing.
Can I add one more quick anecdote?
Of course.
Just for the person who just maybe this is the first of the HFBO videos that they see, and they made it all the way to here, which is going to be really challenging. People can't listen to me that long, but I always was a little bit of a, call it meat fat avert, that I had to trim all fat off of the steak. You're making chicken soup, you got to get all that fat off of the top of the broth out of there, because, well, fats, we've been told fat was unhealthy. No bigger lie in the history of nutrition or health ever. There's a lot of whoppers out there, but as even just in the last 3 months with going full carnivore, and just even, I never was afraid of the fat, because I figured out that fat was healthy, and that's why ketosis and the epilepsy and all the mental health stuff is working. It's the missing fat. But these chuck roasts are so, you get good fatty chuck roast, and I pour the fat back on top of it. And now there's fat. Fat is the best tasting thing you can eat. The steak, the fat tastes much better than the red meat. You're just conditioned to think the red meat is what tastes good. It's because the red meat had that fat in it, on it, around it, and it's soaked in it. The fat is just, and that's what Sarah says here, you're going to live like a king or queen, because fat tastes fabulous. That's why they had to put sugar in all the processed food when they pulled the fat out, or it would be cardboard and you wouldn't eat it. So anyhow, people, embrace the fat. Fat is amazing. It's tasty. You might have to get over a couple of things in your brain. I did with sardines, with sauerkraut, with cottage cheese and fat. And now they're staples. I love them, and I can't imagine not having them. I'll end on that.
One of my first guests I had on the show, Tina, she's huge on X, on Twitter. She's got a huge following there. She's doing carnivore for her family. And when I asked her the fat fueled philosophy, she said, "Fat is your friend." And that has stuck with me, and I use it all the time now. Fat is your friend. I'm very fortunate that I have good relationship with my local butchers, and when the prime rib goes on sale for Christmas and Easter, the local grocery store, they save me all of the fat off the prime rib, and I literally get 40 to 50 pounds at a time, and it lasts me all year round. So I've got the highest quality fat you could possibly imagine. I'm very, very fortunate for that.
Well, welcome to what good relationships can do, right? Be nice to everybody. Awesome. That's amazing.
Have you seen the end of any of my shows? Do you know what I do with the tagline?
Well, I know I've seen something to the end, but I'm not remembering it at the moment.
All right. Well, I'm going to get my get up on, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I have my tenets in life, and it would be like sunshine and body movement. And one of them is to have fun and enjoy life. So I put my get up on, my rapper persona. This is like Run DMC from when I was a kid, or maybe Vanilla Ice, since I'm a white guy.
There we go.
And I have my tagline for the show, which is "Fix yourself with fat." And I say it in my own personal way is "Fix yourself with fat." And so one of the things I've been doing is asking all of my guests to sign us off with the tagline, and then I'm going to put a compilation together. So you think that's something you can do for us, Brett? Can you say that with your own unique personality?
Well, it won't be as good as yours, but yes, absolutely. You just tell me when.
I'm ready for it. You go.
Fix yourself with fat.
There you go. Perfect. I love it.
That's the tagline. Beautiful.
That was perfect.
No, it's a miracle worker. I mean, without it, the brain without the fat soluble vitamins, the brain doesn't work. That's where the brain fog's coming from, people. It's not just the depression, the bipolar. It's brain fog, not being able to read. It's from lack of healthy fat.
That's right. And we're going to fix ourselves with fat and tell a friend.
Fix yourself with fat, baby.
Thanks for coming on, Brett. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Stephen, for having me.